Elena had always believed in doing the right thing, even when no one was watching. That was the kind of woman she was, quiet, careful, and deeply loyal to the people she loved, even the ones who had stopped loving her back. She had grown up in the Greywood Pack, a modest community, tucked between two mountain ranges, where healers were still respected and old knowledge was still taught. Her mother had been a healer, her grandmother before that. Elena had learned from both of them how to read bloodline records, how to trace hereditary patterns, how to find illness before it announced itself. She had a gift for it. Everyone in the Greywood Pack said so. But gifts like that rarely made a woman famous. They just made her useful. She met Darian Voss when she was 24 years old. He was the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, young and powerful, and already carrying the weight of too many expectations. He had been injured badly during a border fight. 3 of his men had died, and he had barely survived the blood fever that followed. Elena had been the only healer available that night. She worked on him for 11 hours without stopping. He woke up alive because of her hands. He fell in love with her because of everything else. For 2 years, they were inseparable. He brought her to the palace quietly, away from the politics and the watchful eyes of his council. She did not mind the secrecy. She was not a woman who needed to be shown off. She was happy in the evenings when he came to find her, happy in the early mornings when she could hear him training in the courtyard below her window, happy in the small, ordinary ways that people in love are happy when they are not yet afraid of losing each other. But the council was watching. They were always watching. The Northern Alliance required a political marriage. It had been discussed for years, and Darian had always pushed it aside. He could not push it aside any longer. The terms were clear, and the pressure was enormous. And Darian, good man that he was in most ways, chose his kingdom over his heart. I told Elena himself. He did not send a messenger or a letter. He came to her room in the evening, sat across from her at the small table by the window, and said what he had to say. He was gentle about it. He was sorry. He said all the right things that people say when they are doing something that hurts someone else, but cannot bring themselves to stop. Elena listened to every word. She nodded. She did not cry, not in front of him. She told him she understood. He left. She packed one bag and walked out of the palace before sunrise. That should have been the end of the story. And for most people, it would have been. A woman loved a man, the man chose something else. The woman left and rebuilt her life. Painful, but simple, clean. But Elena had discovered something in her last months at the palace, something she had not been looking for, and would have preferred not to find. She had spent years quietly studying the old bloodline records in the palace archives, with permission, as part of her work as a healer. She was building a reference library, cross-checking hereditary conditions across the northern packs. It was slow, careful, detailed work, and she loved it. One evening, while comparing records that spanned 3 generations of the Voss family, she found an anomaly. She almost missed it. It was buried in old healer notes, written in faded ink, flagged by someone a long time ago, and then apparently forgotten. She read it twice, then a third time, then sat very still for a long while. The Voss bloodline carried a hereditary condition called Ashenwolf syndrome, a slow, generational disease that the old healers had documented in detail and then lost track of as medical knowledge changed and old records were replaced with newer ones. Left unaddressed across generations, it caused infertility, then neurological deterioration, then complete bloodline failure. It moved slowly. The first generation showed almost no symptoms. The second generation showed mild ones. The third generation bore the full weight of it. The Voss line was already in the second generation. Darian's children, the children he would have with his new wife, the heirs he was sacrificing everything to protect, would not be able to have children of their own, and those children who were born would suffer, and the bloodline that Darian had given up everything to preserve would be gone within 2 generations. Elena sat with this knowledge for 3 days. She thought about leaving it alone. She had every reason to. She had been turned away. She owed the Voss family nothing. Some part of her, the small, hurt part that she was not proud of, whispered that they deserved what was coming, that this was what happened when you let politics make your choices for you. But Elena was not a woman who could stay quiet when she knew how to help. She moved to a small cottage in the western reaches of the Greywood territory and she started working. For 3 years, she corresponded with elderly healers in distant packs, people who still remembered the old medical traditions, who had copies of records that had been lost elsewhere. She sent samples, she asked questions. She ran careful, slow trials on preserved bloodline material she had collected years before. She documented everything with the same precision her mother had taught her, the same patience her grandmother had modeled. She was not searching for recognition. She was not building a case to present dramatically one day. She was simply solving a problem because she knew how, and because the alternative was to let innocent children suffer for something no one had warned their father about. It took her 2 years and 8 months to develop a workable treatment protocol. It took another 4 months to test it thoroughly, and write it up in a form that any competent healer could follow. When it was finished, she put the full documentation in a sealed box and stored it safely. Then she wrote a letter. The letter was short. She was not someone who used words carelessly. She told Darian what she had found, what she had done, and where the documentation was stored. She explained the treatment timeline and the urgency. She said that if he acted now, the syndrome could be reversed before the 3rd generation was born, and the bloodline would be safe. She did not ask for anything. She did not include her address. She sent the letter, and then she went back to her life. Darian's staff placed the letter on his desk with the others. He saw her handwriting. He recognized it immediately. He had not forgotten it, would not forget it, would never fully forget anything about her. But he had trained himself, over 3 years of silence, to set certain things aside. He told himself that it was probably a personal letter. He told himself he was not ready to read it. He set it aside and signed 3 treaties that week, and traveled to 2 neighboring territories, and did not look at the letter again. By the end of the month, it was filed in the archive room, unopened. 14 months passed. Darian's firstborn son, Prince Kale, was 5 years old when he collapsed during a ceremonial event. He was a healthy, bright, energetic child. There had been no warning signs that anyone recognized. The palace healers were called immediately. They ran tests. They consulted records. They brought in 3 specialists from different regions, and then 2 more after that. No one could explain it. The boy's body was failing in ways that did not match any known illness. He was weak. His wolf was not developing the way it should. He was losing strength steadily, and no treatment they tried made any lasting difference. The palace was frightened. Darian was frightened, not the kind of frightened that a king shows in public, but the silent, hollow kind that lives in the chest and does not go away. It was an elderly archivist named Marin who finally made the connection. She had been asked to search through old Voss family medical histories in case something had been overlooked, and she had gone methodically through every box in the archive room, including the box of correspondence that had been filed away unopened over the years. She found Elena's letter. She could see from the filing record that it had never been opened. She could see from the date that it was 14 months old. She read the outside carefully, noted that it was marked with small words in the corner, private medical matter, and brought it directly to the king. Darian read it alone, in his private study, late at night. He read it once. Then he sat back in his chair and stared at the wall. Then he read it again, slowly, word by word. Then he put it down on his desk and pressed his hands flat against the surface and stayed very still for a long time. He had let it sit in a box for over a year. His son was sick. Elena had known, had found the cause, had built the cure, had written everything down carefully and sent it to him, and he had set the letter aside without reading it because he was not ready to see her handwriting. He sent riders out before dawn. Elena was found in the village of Mossfen, 2 territories east of Greywood. She was living simply, teaching herbal medicine to children from small rural families. She had built a quiet life. She had not been waiting for anyone to come. When the king's messenger arrived at her door and explained the situation, she did not seem surprised. She had been prepared for this possibility, though she had hoped it would not take so long. She went to the back of the cottage and brought out the sealed box she had kept ready, the full documentation, organized carefully, with a clear guide on the front explaining where to start. She handed it to the messenger and said he should take it directly to the palace healers, who could begin the protocol immediately. She asked that she not be contacted further. The messenger went back to the king and reported exactly what she had said. Darian came himself. He rode without announcement. He knocked on the door of a small cottage in Mosfen as the afternoon light was beginning to turn gold, and Elena opened the door and looked at him without surprise. She stepped back and let him in. She made tea. She sat across from him at her kitchen table, the same way they had sat across from each other years before, and she looked at him with calm, steady eyes. He asked her why she had done it. He had thought about this question for the entire journey. He needed to understand it. Why would she spend 3 years of her life saving the bloodline of someone who had chosen someone else over her? She was quiet for a moment. She wrapped her hands around her cup. Then she said that it had never really been about him. She said it was about the children who had not been born yet. Children who had done nothing wrong. It was about the people of his pack. Ordinary people who would eventually feel the effects of a bloodline in decline. It was about the fact that she had the knowledge and the ability to fix something that no one else even knew was broken. Staying silent would have made her responsible for the consequences. She could not live with that. He asked her whether she had been angry. She looked at him evenly and said yes. For about a year, she had been very angry. Then she had gotten to work. Prince Kale responded to the treatment within 6 weeks. The palace healers followed Elena's documentation exactly, and the results were clear and measurable. By the 3rd month, the leading specialist confirmed full stabilization. The Ashen Wolf syndrome was being reversed. The bloodline was safe. The 2nd generation of the protocol, designed to protect any future children, was developed directly from Elena's notes and was ready within the year. Darian stood before his full court and acknowledged what Elena Ashwood had done. He spoke plainly and directly, without any political decoration. He said that a woman outside the palace walls, with no resources and no recognition, and no obligation to anyone in that room, had spent 3 years quietly saving his bloodline and his son's life. He said that he did not have adequate words for it. He established the Ashwood Archive in the Royal Medical Library, a permanent, funded collection dedicated to hereditary medicine and old healing traditions, named in her honor. He offered her more: a title, a role, a place in the palace. Anything she wanted, she could have it. She accepted the archive. She declined everything else. She returned to Mosfen. She continued teaching. She planted a small garden behind the cottage. She was not unhappy. Darian wrote letters sometimes, not often. Careful, considered letters that did not ask for things she had not offered. She wrote back occasionally, when she had something worth saying. It was not a reunion. It was not closure exactly. It was something quieter and harder to name, the shape that things settle into when 2 people have been important to each other, and the world has moved them in different directions, and neither of them has been destroyed by it. What remained, after everything, was this. A woman had known something important. She had been given every reason to stay silent. She had chosen not to. She had worked for years, with no audience, and no promise of reward, and she had saved 3 generations of children who would never know her name. She did not need them to know it. She had done it because it was the right thing to do, and she was the kind of woman who did the right thing even when no one was watching. That had always been true. It remained true. It would always be true. And somewhere in the Royal Medical Library, in a room lined with carefully preserved records and old healer notes, her name was on the door, quiet and permanent, and exactly where it belonged.